Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Conversations with Caregivers. At CRIADO, when we say caregivers, we really mean the ones who show up for our community. So the doctors, doulas, community-based leaders, healers, and heart holders who care deeply for our people. In this segment, we're sitting down with those who pour into others to hear their stories, their why, and the wisdom that they've gathered along the way. I am so excited to talk to Lauren. I'll share a little bit about her, but just a little caveat thing. She's awesome. She's one of our experts. She held this series at the beginning of the year about our nervous system, and everyone in the community loved it. So I'm excited to dive deeper about why you do what you do, what brought you here, and how you found your way here. But I'll read your intro first. So, Lauren Dike is a certified somatic practitioner, mind-body coach, and former professional athlete who helps high-achieving individuals and organizations break survival-based patterns and reconnect with their true capacity. Drawing from neuroscience, trauma theory, and lived experience, she creates spaces that blend education with embodied healing, helping people move from burnout and performance into clarity, safety, and meaningful success. She's worked with brands like Lululemon, NASA, which is crazy, and the Honey Pot Company. Welcome, Lauren. I'm so excited to have
Thank you.
you.
I'm so happy to be here.
Yay. Okay, so let's just jump into it. The first question I want to ask is, I know I read your bio, I know I read your intro, but can you tell us and our community who you really are? Like, not your work title, but who you are at your core.
Yeah, I love that question. And I think it's so important because often we see these things on paper, right? And it just doesn't encapsulate the entire person, obviously. And so I think things that have greatly shaped my identity and pieces of who I am is that I'm a twin. And so I always say the experience of having a twin sister, right? And being a
Mm,
Black woman in this world and having someone that can just empathize and sympathize with every single experience you've been through since birth from now is just really, really powerful. And having her in my life, like I don't know what I would do without her because another part of my
mm,
identity is that I'm an adult orphan. And so I lost both of my
mm.
parents. I say young, but both of them before the age of 36, which is relatively young,
Oh,
right? It's something really
yeah.
hard to go through. And so that grief that I still hold to this day is something
Mm,
that is very much a part of my identity. Um, Growing up, we were the first Black family in our neighborhood. And so a
mm,
lot of how I learned the world was through feeling othered, if that makes sense. Like going to
mm-hmm,
school, having my skin color always pointed out, or having questions about my skin
mm.
color, my hair, always just feeling like it was ugly because it didn't look like the other girls.
What
And so
state, what state did you grow up in?
I grew up in Middletown, New Jersey.
New Jersey. Okay.
Yeah, New
Okay, got it.
Jersey. And I think now even my hometown is a lot more diverse, but in the
Mm,
early 90s, it just simply wasn't.
yeah.
And so that's a huge part of my identity. I'm half Cape Verdean, half Nigerian. So I always say that I grew up in an African household, like
Okay.
you. And
Yeah.
so masculine roles, misogynistic, but just because it was more cultural. I don't shame my father for that, but
Yeah.
learning the masculine and feminine roles that played a huge part in who I am. And I've always been a lifelong athlete. So I ran track in college. After college, I was a professional figure competitor, which is a form of bodybuilding.
Mm.
And even now to this day, I do solid core, which is Pilates, and
Yes.
love to work out. Yeah.
That the fact that you were, what is the term you said,
Figure competitor. Yeah.
that's what made you want to get into that? I'm so curious.
So that's an interesting story.
Okay.
So basically, I was training for a marathon,
Mm,
and by default, I'm what they call like a mesomorph. Like I always just have muscles. Like when I
mm.
lose weight, I just get more muscular. I don't get skinny. And so I was at the gym, and a trainer was like, "Do you compete?" And I was like, "Only." And he's like, "You've never heard of bodybuilding, like figure?" And I'm like, "No." And he showed me a picture of a girl, and he's like, "You should do this." And I just did it on a whim. And
Stop.
I did
That
it
must
on
have
a
been an
whim.
athlete in you that said, you know what? Yeah, let me compete in this because I don't know what I'm
Exactly.
doing, but let me just compete. That's wild.
Exactly. And my first show was like a mess because I like didn't know how to walk. My symmetry, you have to have a certain set of symmetry. And they're like, you have great potential, but like this was a mess.
Yeah.
And so from there, I just took all the feedback. I hired a coach and I just like went
Mm.
at it. And basically you turn pro once you win a show of a certain caliber. And pro just means you can
Ah.
compete for money. And so once I turned pro, I competed in one pro show. And then like just looking at what the girls were doing and the body type that like I had to like try to achieve, it just wasn't appealing to me.
Mm.
And so I kind of retired out of it.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
that's wild. I think there's something, and again, there's no off topic in this podcast. We can just we can just flow. But I was listening to this podcast and they had a term called orthorexia, which is an obsession with being healthy and like to the body's detriment. And when you look at when you were looking at the things that the women were doing to make their bodies in that shape, I'm curious if you kind of had that trigger in your mind. You're like, wait, I don't actually know if that's actually 100% healthy and if I want to engage in that, or if it was just simply behavior that you just didn't want to do, like you didn't want to eat salad and protein 24/7, or I don't know what it is, but yeah.
Yeah. So this is actually a huge part of my journey because I looked so healthy on paper, but I was the most
Mm,
anxiety riddled I'd ever been. Like my face was covered in acne because my hormones were all over the place. But I had orthorexia. Like I was obsessing over
mm.
what I would eat to the point where like friends would invite me to dinner and I would look at the menu before online. I'm like, there's nothing healthy. I'm going to make up an excuse to bail out. Right. Or like
Oh
over
yeah.
Thanksgiving, I would like pretend I was sick, but just because I didn't want to eat all the food and deal with my parents harassing me to eat all the
Yeah,
food.
because they're gonna Nigerians about to make sure you eat.
They will pick
About
it
to make
up.
sure.
Yes. And I
Wow.
actually also had exercise nervosa. So I would like eat
Mm,
all this food and then I would work out for 4 hours to get rid rather than like vomiting it, right? I would exercise it out. And so between
mm-hmm.
that and then being judged by my appearance, again, on paper, it looked like I was this great
Mm.
professional athlete, but I was struggling in so many ways. It was a triggering sport for me because of all of those
Yeah.
variables.
Yeah. And so going off of that, like I'm curious, you kind of talked about it a little bit, but what called you to this kind of work that you do with
Mhm.
your somatic healing? Like I know it probably includes your journey with figure building, but how did you find your way into this work?
It stemmed from being burnt out from a job and I quit on a whim. And I was like, once I quit, my problems are going to be solved, right? Like I'm going to feel better. And
Yeah.
then I was waking up every single morning with heart palpitations. And I'm like, there's nothing wrong. There's nothing the matter. And I
Mm,
had tried everything since a young age, from talk therapy to ketamine therapy to medications. And I just always felt off balance, but just very cognitively aware of everything going on. Like my body felt not right. And
mm,
so I don't know how I came across it. Maybe it was just the Instagram gods are speaking to me, but like figuring out that it was my nervous system was the root of my problems. And then like once I saw
mm,
one thing on like nervous system dysregulation, all the signs, and I had all the signs, it caused me
mm,
to want to research and do more digging into the work and then working with my own somatic practitioner. And then realizing like this is something I want to help other people do because I know how it feels to feel like a prisoner in your own body and like on the
mm.
outside looking like everything's okay, but just not feeling okay.
Yeah. I So being a prisoner in your own body is real. And it's hard because it's like either your body's not performing the way that you think it should, whether it's clear skin, whether it's you be having energy or you're exhausted all the time or whatever it is. But for the audience, the people who didn't come to your body talks, can you explain a little bit about what um, somatic healing is or what nervous system dysregulation is?
Yeah, absolutely. So, somatics comes from the Greek word soma, which just means of the body. So, a lot of people think that like people say somatic movement is actually redundant because as long as you're moving, it's somatic. If that makes sense. Like breathing
Ah.
is somatic, lifting weights is somatic. As long as you're moving your body, it is a somatic practice. But somatic healing is about getting attuned to the sensations of your body so that you start essentially learning how to live in your body, right? So
Mm,
literally all of our behaviors, all of our experiences, the root of our experiences are sensations in the body. And so when you say yes to something, if you're not people pleasing, right? There's a sensation in your body, there's an expansion, there's an opening that lets you know it feels safe, right? When you
mm,
perceive something as danger, there's a constriction in your body. And I think a lot of the times we move through this world ignoring the constrictions. And when we surpass them and we bypass them, that's when things like anxiety or depression happen. That's when burnout happens because we're ignoring these really important sensations of the body that, quite frankly, capitalism, oppression has conditioned us to ignore because the more we're removed from our bodies, the more we live in our heads and the more we are striving or overthinking or thinking we have to be a certain way. Um, and so nervous system dysregulation is when your nervous system is constantly activated, even in the absence of physical danger. And so in our body talk, I always mentioned how emotional overwhelm has the same biochemistry as physical danger. So your body doesn't know whether you're being chased down by a tiger or you just get like an upsetting email, right? And so a lot of the times, you can even think in your own life, if something has caused you to be anxious, right? When you're sitting on your couch watching TV, when you think about it, your body will start to get activated just thinking about it, right? That's dysregulation when the body's activated in the absence of that actual stressor. And so when we spend too much time in that activation or even getting stuck in activation, it can look like having different physical conditions. So
mm,
stomach issues, acne, right? Pain, tension, discomfort, or then emotional issues like anxiety or
mm.
being dissociated, wanting to isolate. And so really nervous system dysregulation, a lot of research is showing us that it is the root cause of a lot of the ailments we're seeing in this world.
That's yeah. I learning from you on this body talk has been revolutionary for me because it really is I feel like it could be a deep concept. Understanding the connection of your nervous system to your like a panic attack or um exhaustion or something like that. Like you don't stop to say, I wonder if my nervous system is deregulated or dysregulated. Like
Yeah.
you don't stop to do that, but it really doing the activity with you where we mapped out the different states and like when I'm in this state, this is how I feel, this is how I eat, this is how I sleep, this is how I act. That was so eye-opening for me and I use it to this day. So
I
shout out
love
to you
that.
because it's really amazing and it has changed my perception on, you know what, if I am getting anxiety attacks at work when doing a presentation, it it's it may not be because I have stage fright or it may be that my boss may be making me feel unsafe in these ways and my nervous system is on fight or flight and now my heart's beating because it thinks I'm running from a lion.
Mhm.
Like connecting that was so cool and I think I just wanted to tell you that. Um yeah, and share with everyone that if you haven't been able to do this type of mapping thing, reach out to Lauren. CRIADO, we can probably figure something out for you in content, but I think there's some videos from your teaching that are on our and probably your Instagram.
Okay. Yes, I
So
think so
people should
too.
check that out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Going back to what called you to this work, when you said that you quit abruptly from your job, were you talking about the figure building or was this a different job that you quit from?
Oh, so figure I was always just doing on the side because I wasn't making
Okay.
money from that. But I was
Okay.
a diversity, equity, inclusion consultant. And
Ooh.
so yeah, I was working for a firm and I had just, that's a large part of what brought me to this work too, because I was realizing that all of the diversity, equity, inclusion firms I was working for, we weren't practicing what we were preaching internally because
Mm,
we were like hamsters on a hamster wheel, right? We were always clients
mm,
beck and call. There was so much stress. There was so much workload that we didn't even have a chance to connect and actually practice inclusion and belonging within our organizations. And because we're all so burnt out and stressed, we're always like snapping at each other and like
yeah.
bickering. And it just was like the irony, right? And then I also just noticed that when we were going to doing these workshops, it just
Hmm.
felt deeply unfulfilling because I'm like, first, we're telling people how to behave. And like I
Mm,
said, behavior is so much more complex than just telling people, stop saying this or stop delivering a microaggression and life
yeah.
is solved, right? They weren't embodying it. And then
Yeah.
we weren't helping those who were historically marginalized actually heal from these things they were being triggered by and harmed by. And so I just
Mm.
wanted to be able to do this work in a deeper way. Not that the diversity, equity, and inclusion work that's being done now is not effective, but I think we're ignoring the body and taking an embodied approach.
Mm. So I'm curious, do you think in the way that capitalistic America is today, and that corporate America is, it was corporate America-esque, your previous
Mm-hmm.
role? Yeah. I was in corporate America, quit that. I was miserable. Kind of similar to what you're saying. Like I would literally, I loved talking. I love speaking in front of people. This job was 100% remote. I I got to a point where I would have like I would start sweating and my heart would start beating so fast every time I had to do a presentation for the week. And I was like, this isn't me. This isn't comfortable. I don't like it. I don't need it. My teeth would start like
Mm-hmm.
chattering because of how much I don't know. It was definitely nervous system dysregulation because it was only present it was only when I was presenting in front of one person.
Mm.
So but yeah, anyway, do you think that in corporate America, organizations can actually take steps to help their employees when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion feel safe and comfortable and like vulnerable in a workspace? Or do you think that the way that it's constructed, people have to individually seek it out on their own?
Yeah, I'm of the belief that by changing our individual internal environments, we change our external environment. And
Hmm.
so to me, and a lot of people like to say it's a top-down approach, right? Or like we have to start with
Mm,
systems. And yes, but healed people sustained healed systems because we're doing
mm,
things from a I have to point of view, right? Or if I don't do this, something else will happen. That's what we call fawning. That's a nervous system state of reflexively appeasing so that their safety means my safety, right? It's externally
yeah.
focused. And fawning is not sustainable. And so I think that if organizations, and this is what I'm in fact trying to do, give all of their employees tools, right, to heal
Mm,
their nervous system, then the sky's the limit, right? Because creativity, innovation increase because people feel safer to express themselves, right?
mm,
Conflict ends because people have the tools to communicate and actually respond rather than react, right? Psychological safety doesn't become you doing all these performative gestures. People know how to create safety in their own body so they're not depending on other people. And so
yeah.
to me, that is the missing link, but it often feels too woo woo or too easy because as you saw, like nervous system regulation is very accessible, but people aren't prioritizing it because they're
Yeah.
prioritizing the bottom line over people.
Yeah. And it's like it is very vulnerable. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think if my work came to me and said, "Hey, we have this opportunity for you to regulate your nervous system," or something like that. And then we were talking about like if I was in a group of people I worked with and I had to talk about times that I don't feel safe, genuinely, I don't know if I could open up like that.
Yeah, and I think that's normal. And that's why I think this work is very much about titration, which means like moving slowly and going within your capacity. And so I think it's very
Mm,
much about like essentially working with individuals, but in a way that you're creating a group atmosphere where people don't feel pressure to share those type of things, right? But allowing
mm.
them to create that safety within themselves, and they'll know when they feel safe enough to share this. But really, it's an individual practice first in order to get to that point, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, that does make sense. And then also, I just want to highlight a bar that you said. Healed people heal systems.
Mm,
I love that. Because honestly, I'm in public health right now and we do take a systems approach to like everything. But looking at it from your side, healed people, healed systems, if there's one person who's healed, they're they're going to want to make things better. And it
exactly.
takes people and action to make things better. So I just loved when you said that and it gave me a different perspective that I don't think I had.
Yeah. And I think to that regard too, healed people can thrive in healed systems. Because here's the other thing, when
Mm,
people have trauma, their nervous system has developed patterns to act a certain way because it kept them safe before. And so if I have racial trauma, or if I have sexual, any type of trauma, right? And there's a
yeah.
system that's flourishing and thriving that I have to
Hmm.
integrate into. If I haven't healed my nervous system, I'm going to continue those patterns regardless of the system. And so that's why, even for marginalized people, helping them to heal, we always talk
Mm,
about liberation, right? If you can't embody liberation, you're not going to be able to receive it. You're not going to be able to create it. So I think there's
yeah.
just so many angles from how we actually sustain and create these healed, flourishing systems.
Yeah. I want to ask you about what I think is a misconception about nervous system healing. My
Mm-hmm.
question is, and I only know this because you taught me that this is a misconception, but my question is, at what point can a person's nervous system be 100% healed, and what does that feel like?
Yeah, well, I'm trying to remember what I told you, but my in how I was taught and what I believe, healing is a lifelong journey, right? You're always picking up data, you're always going to confront challenges along the way. And
Hmm.
so really healing it's there's no end point because you're always going to be doing it. But I would
Yeah.
say a true feeling of feeling regulated and safe in your body is that you've done enough, and so there isn't this need to prove or to overwork, or that you haven't done enough, right? It's like you feel a settlement in your body, and that you're also
Mm.
able to ride the wave of activation and deactivation, because the goal isn't to be deactivated or regular or calm all the time, so to speak,
Hmm.
because that would make us robots. That's not the human experience. The goal is to like be able to deal with something challenging, but then recover, right? And honor yourself while recovering, like allow yourself to feel depressed, but allow yourself to bounce out of it and feel calm and good in your body. And so it's like riding a wave. Um,
That that's
that's
exactly
what
what
I
you
told
told
you.
me.
Okay.
That's you yes. So you do practice what you preach. Um, when you said that, because in my head, I'm like, well, I just don't want to feel these feelings. Like I just want to be good all the time. But when you were like, that literally means you're a robot, I'm like, yeah, wait, that's accurate. Like we are
Mm-hmm.
humans living going through this human experience and we have to feel these different emotions and these different triggers. Like that's inevitable. But
Mm-hmm.
learning how to shorten the time, let me see if I'm saying this right. Learning how to shorten the time that you're in these dysregulated states to get back to neutral, you're learning to like shorten that, which in essence keeps your nervous system working in a way where it can be working for you rather than against you more times.
Exactly.
Did
You
that make
expand your window.
sense?
Yeah, you expand your window
Okay.
of tolerance to deal with future
Yeah.
stressors. Because a lot of the times, too, when we're not feeling what we need to feel, that builds up in the system, right? And we don't have capacity for anything else to come our way. And so
Yes.
it really is, because I think there's a misconception about just like tapping and like, I'll make my anxiety go away, right? But the goal
Hmm.
isn't to make it go away. You need to feel it in order to metabolize and process it. But
Mm.
you can help your nervous system create more flexibility by doing those somatic movements.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I am gonna get back to the questions now. But with you talking about like capacity, I know another term you use is like capacity building and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But your work supports high achieving individuals in reconnecting with their bodies. Why is this work important? And I think this is also like capacity building. Why is this work important, especially for Black and Brown women?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think I target high achieving individuals because I am one. And so I know how it feels to be in that mode. And again, like,
Same.
right, I think a lot of women of color are. And
Mm,
I think it stems from, we're in a society where we learn that anything that isn't male is bad, anything that isn't white is bad. So when you're at the
mm,
intersection of that, you're constantly striving to prove that you can assimilate and you're not bad. And so, of
mm,
course, the energy is going to be externally focused. Like, how can I please these people? How can I prove that I fit in? How can I prove that I'm not bad? And I think that's why a lot of women of color are high achieving, because it's the way we've learned to survive. But I
yeah.
think what it's actually doing, and it's breaking us down, because that survival, right, that's stress on our system. Again, there's a buildup of all of this emotions that we are suppressing in order to assimilate. And so when I talk about capacity, it literally means our nervous system and our nerves' ability to metabolize the stress in front of us. And if we
Mm,
cannot, we have to give our bodies recovery. And I think a lot of high achieving people aren't in touch with their body. And so we aren't in touch with what we can actually metabolize. And so we take on more than we can, or again, we suppress our authentic needs. And in
mm,
turn, we don't have much capacity to do much else. And so for
mm.
me, at the worst of it, I was like high functioning at work. And then I would come home and want to binge eat or binge watch TV, and
Yes.
I wouldn't do anything else. And it wasn't because there was anything wrong with me. It was because I was maxing up my capacity. And then when I finally got a chance to slow down, my body just collapsed. It wasn't resting,
Mm,
it was collapsing. And that's another form of stress as well. And so I think it's just so important for high achieving individuals to know this, that usually high achieving is a coping mechanism and it's coming from a wound because in your past, someone or something or some environment told you that overworking was your way to prove your worth.
Overworking is a way to prove your worth. Facts.
Yeah.
I know that not in those words, but through actions. I think I have such a theory about athletes.
Mm.
I loved being an athlete. I'm still an athlete. I consider myself an athlete.
Yeah.
But also like played a sport in college, volleyball. I I think though that when you're proven worthy or you're proven to have your spot on a team if you are constantly doing better than others, comparing yourself to others, constantly having to do better than yourself. Where you are at is never good enough. You're always trying to do more, 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 more. I think that it just creates this really toxic way of being in the basis of our brain that we always just need
Mhm.
to do more and what we're doing
Yeah.
is never enough, which again, I think that it showed like I think that I can do amazing things and I think that sports
Mhm.
taught me that like I can push through, I can juggle a lot of things at once. At the same time, to feel like what you're doing is never enough, you always have to do better. Oh my gosh. That is a
Yes.
lot.
Yes. And being a student athlete at that, like I was talking to my sister because she was a student athlete as well. And she
Mhm.
was like, do you still have like nightmares about like missing a final or like having to run the 4x4? And I was like, yes. And it's like
Listen.
those moments are so ingrained of like feeling stressed and feeling overwhelmed, but having to push through it.
Yes. That feeling of like I have that too where I am nervous that I'll sleep in and mine was
Yes.
always that I'll sleep in and miss practice.
Hmm.
That was mine always in my head. And if you miss, you don't miss practice.
Right.
Or I would be late. Oh my gosh, that is crazy. No,
Yeah.
that's real. Um okay. High achieving individuals, we talked about that. Okay. What are a few signs that someone might be stuck in survival mode? And what is one small shift that they can make to begin to soften that?
Mm. Well, I think everyone looks different. So if we just think about the different nervous system states, right? Like fight or flight, typically
Hmm.
that means anxiety or unresolved anger. And so a sign that you might be dysregulated is you're living more in your head than in your body. So they always say that overthinking is a sign of underfeeling, right? And so similar
Oh,
to that,
wait. Overthinking is a sign of underfeeling.
yes.
Whoa.
Yeah. Because
I
basically
love
your
that.
mind is trying to resolve a threat that isn't truly there. And if you were to feel into
Yeah.
your body, you could actually resolve it by telling your mind that your body is safe. Um, and so I think a lot of people that have anxiety are living in their head. I'm someone that I would be on my couch overthinking for days, right? Or
Mm,
negative self-talk. Anytime your brain is trying to solve something or it's being super critical, it's a state that your body is on this in a capacity to be open and to connect, and that's a survival state. I
mm,
think also it's an energy thing. And so again, we were talking about those high functioning, high achieving individuals. A lot of them are living what we call that functional freeze. And so you're super active during the day, but then you crash and you get home. There's a drawing down of energy because your body is starting to
yeah.
collapse. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so and things like wanting to isolate, wanting to numb with things like alcohol or substances or even food, those are
Mm-hmm.
signs that your body is feeling overwhelmed or stressed. And it's trying to get some relief and soothing.
Mm. Oh my gosh. That just reminded me, the whole food situation. I'm reading a book called, I think it's Eating in the Light of the Moon. It is
Mm,
so crazy. It's about essentially women's relationship with food. And what you were talking about um, made me think of how they connected when we're babies and we're stressed or something. We go to the boob. We're eating. So
yeah.
then we subconsciously maybe make that connection of food to comfort, but the actual feeling that we're feeling is not hunger, it's loneliness or
Yes.
sadness but since we were babies, we were taught if you have any of those feelings, you're eating. Like I
Hmm.
it just talking about food potentially as being a substance or a way to cope, I think is so important. And not in a way to
Yeah.
shame people about how they eat at all, but to think about what your relationship is with food. Because I'm a comfort eater.
Yeah,
Heck yeah.
absolutely.
Heck yeah, I'm a comfort
Absolutely.
eater. And I'm
Yeah.
not hungry, but give me a brownie because I'm sad. Like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I think it's so important, but also it's the food that we're eating. Like a lot of these foods that like
Mm,
shouldn't be on the market, those have stressors in them. And I always talk about
yeah.
like foods like beans, vegetables. There's foods that can actually balance and de-stress you so that if you
Mm,
overeat, it's not as bad on the system and not as addictive. But there's just so many
mm,
different like if you look at my pantry, I have cookie like it's so hard, right? Because there's so
yeah.
many temptations around us.
Yeah. Wait, so question. If I am trying to like food is comforting to me, but
Hmm.
and I know sometimes I overeat because I'm feeling emotions. What
Right.
are the foods that actually are better? I mean, I know obviously not cookies and stuff like that, but can
Yeah.
you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so basically any food that's overly processed, so any more than like five ingredients, right, is going to be a stress in your system just because it takes so much to digest them. And then when
Yeah.
you're looking at sugar, anything over 7 grams of sugar, your body cannot metabolize or digest all of that in one sitting. And
Mm-hmm.
so if you look for foods with less than 7 grams of sugar, but then also whole foods that are nourishing. And so again, beans, there's something called the
Mm-hmm.
bean protocol that I recommend everyone look into.
Okay.
I by having 2 tablespoons to 1 cup of beans with every single meal can help to regulate your nervous system, but also relieve you of a whole bunch of different ailments. Like she cured herself of a whole bunch of different diseases.
Whoa.
Um, yeah. So beans, leafy greens, foods that are not inflammatory. So things like eggplants and tomatoes, those can be inflammatory. Um, and
Eggplants are inflammatory?
yes, unfortunately, like if you have
Why?
arthritis, I think any moonshade plants are inflammatory for
Mm.
the body. Yeah. And it's not,
Oh,
but if you don't have any, like, if you don't have arthritis, I think in moderation, everything is okay, right? But it's just something
yeah.
to be mindful, especially if you're going through a lot of stress, that inflammation isn't good for the stress. Um,
Yeah.
and then lean meats, so like ground beef, um,
Mm-hmm.
chicken, ground turkey, um, leafy vegetables, and then whole grains. So things like brown rice, quinoa,
Mm,
all the stereotypical healthy food, but it's healthy not only because the caloric content, but also they actually start to stabilize the nervous system. And so if you're someone that doesn't like to work out or do somatic movement, just
mm-hmm.
diet, you can start to regulate your nervous system.
I love that. Okay, I want to go, well, it's not really back a little bit, but when you hear the term body literacy, what does that mean to you?
Mm. I think being attuned to your body um, and what it needs.
Mm, that's
Yeah,
fair. That's
that's
fair.
what it means to me. Because I mean, some people are very embodied people, but I never was. So even like right now, as I'm sitting, I'm noticing my shoulders are raised, right? And to just shift them down a little bit, it makes a difference in
Mm,
how I'm showing up. But I think a
yeah,
lot of people are so disconnected from their bodies, they're not noticing these little micro tensions that are happening that are
yeah,
making us more stressed than we need to be. So,
yeah. No, I'm just curious because this is something that CRIADO and Tosi Kai are thinking of as like this term body literacy, and
mm,
it's done in different ways. So, well, the research that I've done shows that it has different definitions. Some of them are using your menstrual cycle to help like tell you more about your body, but from
mm,
what I've read and all of the different things, it's essentially using the language of your body, which are sensations and feelings, to
Mhm.
help educate you on what is actually going awry in your body. And that requires an acute sense of noticing what your body is feeling. And I feel like I'm the same as you. I, for the longest time, did not know when I was stressed. Like physically,
Mhm.
my body, like mentally, I know I know when I've reached my peak. I'm snippy, I'm tired. But like physically, when I am physically under stress, I'm not talking about working out, but whether it's something difficult I'm dealing with or like if I'm late for a meeting, though that type of stress, I would not know it until my body started screaming at me, i.e., acne, my cycles are completely irregular. My I just felt so like sluggish, like, and it wasn't until I got my Garmin watch that would tell me when my blood pressure was up or something like that, and I was stressed. And I've started
Mhm.
now to train myself to know what that feels like. So there will be certain situations like I'm in a meeting and I'm feeling really fired up or something like that,
Mhm.
and I'll be like, you know what? Eh, Let me check my watch. 99 stress. And it's
Mhm.
crazy. And I've now linked it to like my chest will be like my breathing will get faster and my chest will feel like a tight pressure on it. But I never could connect that. And I'm still trying to figure it out how to do it on a daily basis, to notice it in the moment, to pause, correct it if I can, so that I'm not just perpetuating the stress in my body.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a very, very much a somatic approach to, yeah, existing. And I think those vitals are really important too, because I use the Aura Ring
Yeah.
and I check my HRV daily, my heart rate variability,
Yep.
because especially before my period, like I'll feel very energyless and like then I'll look at my
Mm,
HRV and it's like 18 compared to usually being 40. And I'm like, oh, okay. Now I know it's actually extra validation to take the time to recover because otherwise I probably would have pushed through, right?
yeah.
It's so important.
Yeah. I want to get an Aura ring. I think heart rate variability is a number that we should all know for ourselves. I think it's
Hmm.
so important. The Garmin watch, they have like, I think it's the watch that I have. It's a little old, but they tell you your stress and they take into account these things. But HRV is so cool. I am curious, just from a personal standpoint, how has your experience been with the Aura ring? Do you like it? How is
I
it? Has it shifted anything in your life?
I like it. I think I mainly use it because it tracks like your activity and your
Mm-hmm.
resting heart rate, all of those things in your sleep. It's been really good to track my sleep, but I think mainly the HRV was really important to me because and it's really sad that like I need data to validate my experience, but like I'd always feel like energyless or
Yeah.
not in the mood to do things. And now when I can tie it to my HRV, I'm like, oh, my body is literally in need of recovery. And so that's been really important
Mm.
for me. But no, I really like it. I mean, I've had it for 3 years now. So
Okay. Okay.
yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna add it to my wants.
Yeah.
Okay. Shifting a little bit, hormones. I know the work that you do is more nervous system, but you keep talking
Hmm.
about stress and the main stress hormone, cortisol. I'm curious if you have drawn the line between nervous system and hormones before, and if so, what lines have you drawn?
You mean like the
And
connection?
yeah.
Um, Well, definitely, because when cortisol raises, right, there's like a host of things that happen, like your white blood cells go down, and so your immunity goes
Mm,
down.
mm-hmm.
But then also there's a connection between estrogen and stress. And so
Mm,
for us women, we need a certain level of estrogen for our our reproductive system to operate correctly, but also for to remain in homeostasis. So we don't get things like acne and all of that.
mm-hmm.
And I was listening to a podcast recently where they were saying that a lot of women in marriages where their men are not supporting them enough or where they feel like they have to
Mm,
take the lead, their
yeah.
estrogen is actually dropped and their cortisol is raised. So it's like there was a
You need
link
a good partner. Okay.
yeah, it was a link to like literally having being able to feel safe enough to rest in your femininity to keep yourself in balance. But I don't know enough about hormones, but I do
Yeah,
know
that's
that
fair.
stress pretty much mixes them up and f's them up. So
Yeah, yeah,
really
and I
important. Yeah.
and I imagine too if your nervous system, tell me if I'm saying this wrong. If your nervous system is dysregulated, you
Mhm.
likely have higher stress, and higher stress equals hormone dysregulation in some way.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that by working to regulate your nervous system, you actually are working to balance out your hormones, whether or not, like whether it's estrogen or cortisol or something like that, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, because
Okay.
nervous system dysregulation is the root of everything.
I love this conversation.
Me too.
Okay, what do I want to ask now? Oh, okay. Your background as a former professional athlete is really, really cool and unique. And I'm curious how that shapes your understanding of resilience and recovery,
Mm.
either positive or negative, either way.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think there's positive and negatives. Like an athlete taught me a lot about rhythm and testing my edges. And so I'm sure you can relate. We had an off season, we had an in season, we had two off seasons really.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's this I can't describe it, but I would get this surge of energy whenever I pushed myself, and it was really rewarding, right?
Yeah,
And it was a sense of bravery too, because you never know if you can actually push yourself past certain levels.
yeah,
But I think where we get into the cons is that during the on season, our energy isn't consistent, right? And so when I
yeah,
needed those breaks or I needed to go slower than my other teammates, there was shame involved, right?
yeah, yeah.
By both coaches, but also self-inflicted. Or like having to
Mm-hmm.
go to the recovery room and taping up an injury that I clearly shouldn't have been running on, but I had to because I was on scholarship and because there was
Yeah,
factors. And so I think it taught me a lot about rhythm and pushing past and challenging myself. But it also created this awareness of how much pressure I put on myself, how much fawning I did in the way of like not speaking up for myself and advocating for myself.
mm,
Um, and also about the dangers of being in your head because also there were some races where I was just in my head and not in my body and I would run
mm,
minutes slower not because I wasn't prepared because I spent so much energy living in my head and that's energy that's spent too, right? That can wear down the
yeah.
body. And so yeah.
I think track is so wild because it's literally you against you. Even though you're against others, like
Right.
I think track is because I played team sports my whole life, never an
Mhm.
individual sport. Individual sports, y- exactly what you said. If you're in your head, that's like you've defeated yourself a little bit.
Yes.
And like learning to I don't know if calm's the right word, to calm it, to to conquer it or whatever, to achieve a goal is like that is an insane amount of discipline and control of your mind
Yeah.
that I really, really admire.
Yes. And if you don't, and that's exactly what it is. That's what we call capacity because it's not about getting rid of those sensations, but about
Mm,
being with them and holding them in a way that doesn't take over you. And I never had that capacity. I would suppress a lot of things and pretend I
mm,
was good, but I never
mm.
had the capacity for that. And so I think some of the best athletes are like, okay, I feel fear right now. My mind's going a little crazy, but I can regulate this and I can be
Yeah.
with this in a way where it's not going to mess up my performance. And that's something, unfortunately, when I was competing, I never got a hold of. So yeah,
Yeah. Well, I mean, you did pretty good. You did, you did
I
pretty
faked it
good. You're
enough.
on
Yeah.
scholarship, you know? Okay, another question. I love talking about athletics. You
Mhm.
talked about how there was shame involved when you were maybe you needed extra rest or your body needed extra rest and you still had to perform. Do you
Mhm.
think that there should be and is a way for women in athletics to be sensitive around cycles?
And I think because there's so much research showing about how our energy changes throughout cycles,
So
right?
much. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think when I reflect back, like all of my worst times were when I was PMSing, and you don't feel safe enough to tell your male coach, like, listen,
Yes.
like my body, my cramps, like this is really hard for me,
Because
right?
then you're just complaining and push through it, push through it. Every girl
Exactly.
deals with this, whatever, whatever.
Exactly. But I'm actually wondering if, like, at the Olympic level, if they have, because there's more research now, if they help female athletes train around their cycles. I don't know, but I think that would
Yeah.
be amazing because it isn't in the long run. I think it's going to be better for all of us, right? Because it's
Yeah.
like you can push when you can push and you recover when you need to recover. It's as simple as that. So
And when you recover, when you listen to when you need to recover, your pushes can be even greater.
exactly, they're more
Like,
productive. Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also had a male coach and I was never educated on what my cycle, like needing a rest, why I felt like
Mhm.
completely exhausted some days when other days I felt like I could run and sprint for hours. Like I was never educated on that. And I think that it's a huge miss in college athletics. I think it's a huge miss in high school athletics to not educate women on their bodies and in terms of athletics, what performance looks like with your bodies. Because I would get so frustrated with myself when my performance wasn't there and I know I can do it because I've
Yeah.
done it before and then now I'm pulled out of the game and I have to sit and now I'm embarrassed and I'm mad
Right.
and all my emotions are going crazy when in actuality if I knew that there was maybe a reason behind it, I wouldn't feel as crazy. I'd be like, "You know what?
Mhm.
This does suck." But I understand that this is a wave and a cycle and this isn't forever.
Right, exactly. And even thinking back in running specifically, so many of my teammates like stopped getting their periods and they're like, oh, I don't have like they
Mhm.
were like laugh about it, but I'm like, this is
Yes.
not healthy. This is actually nervous system dysregulation, right?
Yes.
And so it was kind of just shrugged off, but in the long run, it was not good for them. And so even education around that, like it's
Yes.
so important.
Yes, same. My cycle was very irregular when I was playing, and I wish someone had told me. They were like, "You're not getting enough protein. You're not eating. You're not."
Hmm.
It's only because I'm not getting enough. Listen, I eat
Right.
all this chicken you all serve me. I eat all of the chicken. I eat the pasta. I'm getting enough calories, okay? But like there wasn't even anyone to say, hey, like your cycle's not right because we would do our physical, right? And they'll ask you your
Hmm.
last time you had your cycle, all that jazz. But then if you're for me, my experience was that yeah, my cycle, I haven't had it for a couple months. They're like, "Oh, how are you eating enough calories?" Why is that where you go? To like
Right.
which that could be a sign of not
Hmm.
getting enough calories for sure. But then when you do the math and you figure out actually no, that's not the issue. Why was there no other follow-up as to what's
That's
going
exactly
on?
it. Yeah.
It's
Yeah, that's
crazy.
exactly it. Yeah, it's scary. And I just hope that systems get better because I mean, I went to college a lot earlier than you and it was even
Yeah.
the mental health aspect was terrible. Now I know a lot of teams have like psychologists on the teams and all of that, but
Yeah.
even athletes need a lot of support because it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work.
Yeah. I agree. Okay. We got a couple more minutes.
Okay.
I'm curious for you, what practices or tools do you personally do when you're feeling disconnected, overwhelmed, or in need of grounding?
Mm. That's a good question. And it really depends on how activated I am. And
Okay.
so if I'm very, very activated, I always use movement to sort of discharge that so I can get more in touch with my body. Because sometimes when
Mm-hmm.
we're feeling all those sensations, it's like it's too overwhelming. You can't even feel your body, right?
Mm,
Um, and then I really just go deep internally and I tend to my body because a lot of the times and what I've been conditioned to is either to suppress or ignore or think I'm being dramatic. And what I find is that
mm,
when I go in and say, like, what do you need or where is this coming from? Not only do I get answers that like help me just feel more validated in how I'm feeling, but I give them space to resolve because what research
mm,
shows is that emotions can actually like anger, anxiety actually can metabolize within 90 seconds. But what keeps us in those loops is like thinking about it and not feeling it, right? Not letting them metabolize. And so I really just try to give them
yeah.
space so they can start to move through me. And then like grounding can either be with breath. Sometimes I just ground with like touch, just like pressure. And those are things that have been really, really helpful for me. Sometimes I'll journal after to just journal what came up and just see what
Yeah.
lessons came up and helps me too with relating with my clients. But um, it's not about doing more. It's actually like being with and just going internally that helps a lot.
I love that. And then, okay, kind of on the flip side, What is something that you have unlearned in your caregiving? Again, caregivers are people who just care for our community, in your
Mhm.
caregiving journey, either about success, healing, or how we care for others. Something you've
Mhm.
unlearned.
Something that I unlearned. What's coming up that feels important to mention, because again, I always talk about myself being a recovering people pleaser and fawner, is
Mm,
that I would get really enmeshed with other people, like absorbed in their experiences. And I thought that was me being empathetic, right? But
mm.
there wasn't a boundary between how I was feeling in my body and how they were feeling in their body, to the point when, like, I would go to a dog shelter, and like I couldn't do it because I'm like, I can't like feel all of this for these dogs. Like I feel like I'm them in
Yeah.
this cage, right? Or like if one of my friends was going through something, it was like I couldn't sleep. And what I've
Mm,
learned is that you can be empathetic without getting enmeshed in people. You have to create that boundary. And that actually makes me a stronger healer, because then I can help people with their pain with, again, without feeling it, but also without feeling like I have to fix them or solve. But again, just being
mm.
with them and knowing that like my ability to stay calm and grounded in my body is enough to help them and regulate them. So yeah,
I
just
love that.
yeah, feeling more of what I need to feel so I don't overfeel what other people are feeling has been really powerful for me.
Yeah. And I think as healers, it's underrated to simply hold space. And I
Mhm.
think when you're grounded in yourself and in your emotions, you're able to actually hold space for
Yeah.
others. And a lot of people can't hold space in those ways. So I'm sure that that's also like that lesson that you've learned, you're then able to hold space for your clients even better,
Yes,
which is
absolutely.
awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. I
Yeah. Okay.
yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I was gonna say, no, you go, and then I have one more question.
Oh no, I was just going to build on that and say, yeah, no, you're exactly right. Because sometimes we come from like this, I don't want to say selfish, but when we're helping other people, it's like we want to prove that we can help. And so we
Yes.
almost like, I remember when I first started, I was like almost cutting off my clients to interject my knowledge. Or as they
Yes.
were talking, I'm like, okay, what am I going to say next to like help them, right? And again, it takes you away from the experience of just being with them and helping to regulate them by being a safe space. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
just to build on what you were saying.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, last question. If our community walked away remembering one thing from this conversation, what do you hope it would be?
That the most powerful thing that you could do for yourself is to hold yourself in everything you're
Mm,
feeling. And so when you're feeling bad or you've done something quote unquote bad, know that there's a root cause just from the patterns that your nervous system has learned to survive, right? And so if you can learn to just be with them and support them rather than try to fix them or shame them or suppress them, in
mm,
the long run, it's going to make you a more flexible person, a more compassionate person, because you can be compassionate to yourself, you can be more compassionate to others. And it's really just going to start to create more ease in your life, because a lot of our tension is caused by like should be's or shame. And really, we
facts.
have the capacity to provide ourselves with that ease and safety.
That was so beautiful.
Aw.
That was such a good wrap up. Oh my gosh. I don't have anything to say other than that. I really, really loved having this conversation. It is overdue. Thank you for your patience as we got all this organized. I am
Yes.
so happy that you are part of the CRIADO community and you are a resource for our people. But for those who may not know where to find you or how to get in touch with you, can you give us that information?
Yes. And I love part of being part of Creato as well. So thank you. I think that there's no easy way. Okay, I think the best way is you can follow me on Instagram. It's Harmonna Wellbeing. Harmonna is spelled Harmonna and then Wellbeing. And then my website is harmonna.org. And so from there, there's a contact form, my email, all of my services. And so that's probably the easiest way.
Yes, perfect. And also on the Criado website, we have Lauren there. And if we don't have her website linked, it will be linked shortly. So you could also find her information under our team and Criado experts on our website. Thank you so much, Lauren. This was so
Yes.
fun.
Thanks, Tosi.